to Chapter 3. So let's move on to Chapter 4, Economics. You can follow along with the Kaplan GED Test Prep 2020 Plus book. Remember that you can play, pause, or rewind at any time that you like. So why don't we go ahead and get started with Lesson 1.
As a reminder, we will be utilizing the Kaplan GED Test Prep Plus 2020 book for this and all videos offered through the GED On platform. You can find links below to purchase the book at your local store or online. Remember to register your book at captest.com/moreonline for additional resources. We will be covering Unit 3, Social Studies, Chapter 4, Economics, Lessons 1 through 4. You can find Lesson 1 starting on page 466. Lesson 1, Basic Economics Concepts. Let's talk about economics. It is a social science that focuses on the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. Capital is a term for items that can produce income. Goods or services are items that businesses invest capital in to sell for profit. Developed through labor, which transfers capital and materials into goods or services for sale. Let's take a look at an example of how the world of economics works by looking at through the lens of a computer business. A computer business needs to make capital investments into a factory building and equipment installation for production. The computer business needs to hire workers or managers to manage the factory and use the equipment. The computer business needs to purchase materials to build the computers. So materials equals producer goods. The business then sells the computers, which are now consumer goods. Now that we have seen what it takes to run a business, let's dive deeper into markets through which businesses operate. Everything that we purchase comes from some type of market, where the world of consumers and producers intersect. In economics, price is related to supply and demand. Sellers and buyers negotiate prices in contracts while competing for the best term in the market. Thus, goods or services are distributed throughout the market so they may be purchased or consumed in areas in which they are in demand. Some of our most popular markets are producer market, a market for producer goods such as produce, like a farmer's market. Retail or wholesale. This is a market for consumer goods like your local grocery store. Raw material market, a market for natural resources or commodities such as a gem store. Financial market, a market for stocks and bonds like Wall Street. Ever wonder how prices get determined for products? Within the field of economics, prices for products are determined through the scope of supply and demand. In the ideal world, sellers would make consistently good profit, while buyers would purchase their desired items at the largest quantity for the best price. However, this is rarely the case. For instance, when a product is scarce, sellers are put in a positive position by being able to raise the price of their product due to its device availability through other producers. On the other side of the coin, product scarcity affects buyers by providing with minimal purchasing abilities or less able to shop around. In a similar fashion, if there is too much product on the market, sellers have to lower their price to compete and buyers have better deals to choose from. Let's move on to practice 1, found on page 467. All right, everyone. At this time, go ahead and complete questions 1 and 2 based on the information found on page 466. Click play when you are ready to review it together. Okay, first up, question 1. What is the main role of labor in an economy? A, to provide capital to start new businesses. B, to convert capital and raw materials into products and services. C, to purchase all goods and services that are produced. D, to purchase raw materials in retail and wholesale markets. Okay, so let's remember that we talked about the word labor. We are both speaking about the workers or laborers that make the products themselves, and also their labor, the actual work. Knowing this, we can easily determine that option A cannot be true as the laborers do not provide the capital, but in fact use it for production. In the same fashion, options C and D are also apt, as we know that they do not buy the materials, goods, or services, as they use the materials to make a product, and the products they create are used as goods or to provide services. Thus, the only correct answer can be to convert capital and raw materials into products and services. Let's move on to question 2. Which of the following is an example of a producer good rather than a consumer good? A, a pencil. B, a can opener. C, a cell phone. D, a plastic material. Going back to our previous conversations, we know that a producer is something that makes a product and a consumer is something that is ready to be purchased. A producer or good are materials and items required. Looking at our answer options, we can see that the consumer, such as ourselves, is likely to purchase a pencil, a can opener, and a cell phone. However, plastic is a material, therefore a producer good. Therefore, the correct answer is D, a plastic material. At this time, pause the video, complete practice questions 3 through 7, and click play when you are ready to continue. Let's move on to lesson 2, the U.S. economic system. Given the amount of freedoms that we have in the U.S., it should be no surprise that the economic market is controlled by the economic activity of individuals and businesses. The U.S. economy is founded on the principles of laissez-faire, capitalism, which is the belief that individuals are free to take action on behalf of their own best interest economically. This is driven by our ability to choose employment as we see fit, being able to become entrepreneurs if we wish, and overall, being able to seek education and training and anything in between to meet our goals. Thus, the sum of individual actions equal the best interests of a society as a whole. In order to keep our markets going, we need the assistance of free enterprise and competition to fuel it. Businesses are expected to compete with one another through their products and operations, expanding their business capacity, integration of broader functions for their operations. However, like with anything else, with growth, there needs to be a set of regulations to keep items in control. Businesses are not allowed to form monopolies, which are single companies that control an entire industry, or oligopolies, closed groups of companies that control whole industries. Because the U.S. economy is composed of businesses and contributions from individuals, it is not under a single form of control and thus can be often difficult to predict for. However, we do know that the economy typically follows and moves throughout a business cycle composed of 4 phases. While the phases themselves may be consistent throughout history, they vary greatly in length and strength. Let's take a look at how this works. The first phase is the growth phase, where businesses typically invest or expand optimistically. Phase 2 is the slowdown phase, where the growth from phase 1 is slowed and or stopped by one or more factors, such as limited resources, production limitations, minimal staff, etc. This takes us to phase 3, the recession or depression phase, the point in the cycle in which employees are laid off, business investments are stopped, and production is decreased. This is typically where consumer spending decreases as well. Lastly, there is phase 4, the recovery phase, where there is slow and uneven recovery across the economic sectors that eventually lead to a new growth phase, or phase 1, once again. Economics in the United States. The banking and investment industries operate under the principles of free enterprise. A pivotal role of banks, savings, or loan associations is to create pools of funds in order to make money available as credit to both businesses and consumers. Similarly, stock exchange also allows investors to purchase shares of stocks which simultaneously act partial ownership of a business. Savings or investments make funds available for businesses to utilize for growth. Investments in stocks are risky as the value of the stock is dependent on the success of a business. However, the potential return is generally larger than the interest rates on the savings account. Let's move on to practice 2, found on page 469. Okay, everyone. At this time, go ahead and pause the video and complete questions 1 and 2 based on the information found on page 468. When you are ready to continue, press play. Let's look at question 1. Why are monopolies not permitted in the United States? Our options are A, monopolies are too efficient, B, monopolies are part of laissez-faire capitalism, C, monopolies result from free enterprise, or D, monopolies shut out competition. So if you remember back to our previous lessons, we discussed that monopolies and oligopolies were both not allowed in the US economy. And also, we learned that economy operates under the freedoms of laissez-faire. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but I am trying. Knowing this information, we can automatically determine that answer B and C are not valid, which leaves us with option A and options D. If we look at option A, monopolies are too efficient. That seems a bit odd, as efficiency is typically a positive attribute. Would we have banned something because it was efficient? Probably not. But let's look at option D. Monopolies shut out competition. This, in fact, is true, as monopolies are a single company controlling an entire industry, which leaves little room for others to join in on the profit and sales. This is a negative and it goes against the basis of laissez-faire. Therefore, D is the correct answer. Question 2. According to the passage, blank is one characteristic of a recession. A. Increased job growth. B. Large investments of capital. C. Increased consumer spending. D. Rising unemployment. The recession, as you may recall, is the third phase of the business cycle in which consumer spending decreases, unemployment rises, and businesses act very conservatively. Knowing this, we can determine that answer A through C are not part of this phase of the cycle, and thus D is correct again. At this time, pause the video, complete practice questions 3 through 6, and click play when you are ready to continue. Lesson 3, the economy in the U.S. government. While the United States operates under a primarily free market economy, which it is mandated to maintain in good condition, the executive and legislative branches of government are fairly involved in developing the U.S. government budget. This is particularly important to know, as the government can cause great impact on the economy, given that it controls our taxes, employment, and also involves itself in borrowing and spending money. Therefore, the budget may include either a surplus of revenue or a revenue deficit. The federal government is responsible for enacting laws in courts to maintain property rights. In addition, it must ensure to enforce fair legal standards for business operations. Therefore, as a whole, the federal market or government is responsible for maintaining good conditions when it comes to a free market system. They should provide a currency and operate the U.S. Mint. They make coins and print paper money. The Federal Reserve System manages the total amount of money that is available for lending and borrowing in private banking systems. They also slightly control the interest rates. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or the FDIC, they provide insurance for the money in individual bank accounts in the case of a possible bank fraud or failure. The federal government's responsibilities don't end there. One of its biggest responsibilities is to promote the general welfare of a nation. This means that the government needs to step in to manage items that the free market cannot provide. Let's review a few of these examples by starting with infrastructure. These are the basic physical and organizational structures: buildings, power plants, roads, highways. Let's move on to OSHA, which stands for Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which is a federal agency that is responsible for the protection of workers on the job. Next, the FDA. This is something that you've probably heard of. It stands for the Food and Drug Administration, which is a federal agency that is responsible for ensuring that food is safe, drugs are effective, and cosmetics or drugs are properly labeled. Lastly, there is the FTC, or the Federal Trade Commission, an entity which ensures that a product claims in advertisement and packaging are true and complete. Let's move on to practice 3, found on page 471. At this time, go ahead and pause the video to complete questions 1 and 2 based on the information found on page 470. Let's go ahead and look at our first question. When the U.S. government blank, it is an indication that the government has a budget surplus. Let's look at our options. A, issues bonds through the United States Treasury. B, attempts to boost the economy by cutting the discount rate. C, registers expenditures that exceed its revenues. D, registers revenues that exceed its expenditures. So we see in the question itself, the term budget surplus is mentioned, which indicates that elected leaders may have either spent the additional funds or cut taxes, leaving funds left over. So again, we're looking for an answer that indicates that there is money left over. Or another way to look at it is that in a budget surplus, there is money left over after partying off any expenditures. Looking at our answers available, we can see that the only answer that aligns with this is D, registers revenues that exceed its expenditures. Okay, let's move on to question 2. Which of the following legislative actions would lead to a direct increase in consumer spending? A, raising Social Security contributions. B, decreasing spending on federal work projects. C, cutting the federal income tax. Or D, ratifying an international trade agreement. So what this is asking us is what will push us as consumers to spend more money. Answer A alludes to the fact that we would as consumers have to pay more into Social Security, which would take more of our funds. Therefore, the answer can't be correct. Answer B, decreasing spending on federal work projects, also can't be correct. Answer C, cutting the federal income would actually leave customers with more money to spend, while option D would either decrease consumer spending or would have no direct effect on consumer spending. Therefore, the correct answer is C, cutting the federal income tax. At this time, pause the video, complete practice questions 3 through 6, and click play when you are ready to continue. We are now moving on to Lesson 4, Labor and Consumer Issues. As employees, individuals are provided wages and possibly other benefits in exchange for the labor that they provide. Hourly employees are individuals who are paid only for the number of hours that they work. These earnings may fluctuate due to the demand of their labor. Salary employees are individuals who are paid consistent wages at all times, although their actual work hour amount may fluctuate as well. Regardless of the type of pay, an employee's total compensation for a job is a combined value of their compensation and benefits, such as health insurance, vacation pay, special savings plan. However, workers and their employees must pay taxes and purchase insurance to cover their own work-related challenges, such as injury, disability, or unemployment. Given the information just mentioned, it is pivotal to do your due diligence and research the job that you accept and to ensure that it works for your needs. Also, it is important to know whether your industry changes rapidly, as you will need to seek new training to be better prepared for a potential change. Let's look into labor unions. Some employees engage in direct or individual contracts with their employers. However, labor unions are fairly common within certain fields and professions. Unions negotiate employee contracts for specific wages and working conditions for all union members through collective bargaining. If such agreed upon conditions are not met, the union can call a strike, during which employees refuse to work. In the case that negotiations are not able to be developed, federal mediators are called upon to intervene through the National Labor Relations Board. We all participate in the economy by being consumers, through which we are provided with a large array of selections of goods and services to choose from. While this can come with great options, it is very important to remember that we as consumers must be conscious and wary of everything we purchase. While the federal government has developed numerous agencies to protect consumers, it is also the responsibility of a consumer to protect themselves by reading product labeling and hazards, following product instructions, reading and understand product or service contracts, and responsibility agreeing to expenses that can be upheld. Let's move on to practice 4, located on page 473. Okay, everyone, we are on our last set of practice questions. At this time, go ahead and pause the video and complete questions 1 and 2 based on the information found on page 472. Once you are ready to review them together, go ahead and click play. Okay, let's look at question 1. What is a worker's total compensation? A, wages only. B, benefits only. C, wages and benefits. D, the amount received in unemployment benefits. Okay, so if you recall back to our lesson, we spoke about wages and benefits. Wages are what employees are paid, such as salary or hourly wages, while benefits are items such as health insurance and holiday pay. However, a worker's total compensation is a combined value of both the wages and benefits, meaning that answer C is the correct answer. All right, last practice question of our chapter. Reread the second paragraph on page 472. Which of the following statements is a conclusion rather than a supporting detail related to the paragraph? A, workers must learn skills throughout their lives to be prepared for changes in their industries. B, most steel manufacturing moved out of the United States. C, many steel workers had to retain themselves and learn new skills. D, workers sometimes lose their jobs because of major economic restructuring. When reading the paragraph, we can see that it focuses on the rapid changes that often take place in the workplace or industry, which affect job availability and its impact on employees. While it does mention steel manufacturing moving out of the United States or people losing their jobs, these are examples of the overall paragraph and supporting details, but not a conclusion. Therefore, options A, B, and D are not correct. This leaves us with the correct answer and conclusion of answer C. Workers must learn skills through their lives to be prepared for changes in their industry. At this time, pause the video, complete practice questions 3 through 6, and click play when you are ready to continue. Congratulations, you made it through chapter 4. Next up, we are moving on to Unit 3, Social Studies, Chapter 5, Geography and the World. See you soon.